Καλημέρα σας. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ που με καλέσατε να μιλήσω σε αυτό το σπουδαίο συνέδριο. Χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ που είμαι μαζί σας, αλλά για να μην χαλάσω τελεία τη γλώσσα σας, μάλλον θα συνεχίσω στα αγγλικά. Good morning, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to present my country and the happiest people in the world. Well, maybe with a question mark, as you can see. Are the Danes the happiest people in the world? Many studies and opinion polls have named us as such. This spring, in the World Happiness Report, Denmark was once again ranked as the happiest nation in the world. And ever since the European Commission started publishing the Eurobarometer back in 1973, Denmark has topped the tables dealing with well-being and happiness. How come? I mean, after all, if you have been there, you will know that it's a country with a pretty awful weather most of the year, actually. And how does happiness correspond with lower life expectations than other Nordic countries, with rather high suicide rates and high levels of alcohol consumption, which is also some statistics that Denmark tops? Some researchers suggest that Danes simply have low expectations of life. We are just happy that things usually don't go as bad as we expect. If a year has passed and no catastrophe has struck, well, then we are quite happy. I must admit, after listening to the discussion earlier on this morning, I think that maybe we are also characterized by a lack of sophistication. I can't imagine a conference in Denmark starting with such a serious philosophical discussion at such a high level as I experienced here. So maybe we are just the happy guruni that you talked about. But I think if we do look at some of the parameters being studied in happiness indexes, I think it becomes clearer why the Danes come across as pretty content with their lives. And I think these are maybe parameters that are on a bit lower level of abstraction than what we discussed earlier on, but I think corresponds to some of the issues that were raised in this movie from Bhutan. First of all, you can look at the level of corruption. I think that Denmark is characterized by really a very high level of non-corruption. The Danish authorities are normally competent, approachable, and uncorrupt, and the citizens believe them to be so. We were ranked the second country in the Transparency International 2011 index of corruption perceptions, reflecting just that fact. And I actually recall some years back I was taking part in a meeting with the visiting delegation from the European Commission. They were traveling around the EU member states to discuss corruption, how to combat corruption, and in this meeting I participated as representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but there were also representatives from the police and the judiciary and so on. And we were discussing, well, could we come up with some examples of corruption in Denmark? And I think the best example the Ministry of Justice could come up with was a group of car inspectors who had received a bottle of whiskey for their Christmas party from a customer and had been punished for that. And I'm sure that if you search, you would find more serious issues of corruption also in Denmark, but I think that such a case was actually the one example that they could come up with, shows that this is a phenomenon that's practically absent from public life in Denmark. And I think that contributes to the next dimension. Let me see. Oh, yeah, it's still on this slide. Denmark is also characterized by a very high level of trust. We are much more trusting of people we don't know than most other nations. We simply do not believe that other people are out to cheat us, or that the authorities or the politicians are out to cheat us. most research show trust to be an important ingredient in happiness. 89%, almost 90% of Danes express a high level of trust in each other, as you can see on this slide. The OECD average is 59%, and if you look at the slide, you can see Greece is almost at the bottom with 40%. So it's quite a significant difference. Some analysts also measure public trust in government with voter turnouts. And in the most recent parliamentary elections in Denmark, over 87% of the persons entitled to vote casted a vote, again almost 90%. The 2011 average for the OECD was 70%, and in Greece's latest elections, I think it was about 62% who voted. So again, I think a significant difference. I think you could also look at dimensions of political and social empowerment, some of the dimensions that were also mentioned in Bhutan. I think my country is characterized by a high level of political freedom, and people in general feel empowered to change things that they don't like. I think it was mentioned also in the discussions earlier on that the feeling that you can control your own life is a quite important part of happiness. Also, social mobility is quite high. There's very little of your present-day income that's dependent on what your father's income level were, as you can also see in this this table, where Denmark comes out as the country where there's least of a link between the individual income and what your parents were earning. So there's quite an equitable society where it's possible to progress even if your parents were not very rich. I should, however, stress that I think we have also serious challenges in overcoming the educational differences. There's still a very high risk that if your parents didn't have a higher education, you will also not get one. It's not easy to break that dependency. We pay a very high level of taxes, but I think that most Danes feel that they do get a lot of benefits from those taxes. Free education of pretty high quality, free healthcare, good infrastructure. And crime levels are also low. And even though most Danes sometimes feel that they are increasing, the statistics show that they are actually dropping. So the streets of Denmark are very safe, and again, come and see for yourself. I think one of the last dimensions I would mention is and maybe of interest also for the people representing private companies and so on here is that we do have quite a decent work-life balance. It's possible to have full-time jobs both for the men and the women, even if they have small children, because we have very good childcare from the early years. And that, of course, contributes to a high level of equality in Denmark. There's very little difference between the labor market participation of men and women. And I think while we probably complain as much as any other nation about our salary levels, money do actually play less of a role in our social life than you might see elsewhere. I don't think it's not a quality in Denmark to flash your wealth. Having a big car or a big house, it's not really something that earns you any kind of status in Danish society. I would say on the contrary, it's almost looked a little bit down upon, and people think you're just showing off if that's how you spend your money. So free time is often spent with family and friends, and more money is spent on socializing than on these sort of large consumer goods. I should maybe add that I personally think that the fact that workplaces in Denmark generally have a rather pleasant working environment is also of importance. I think in most Danish workplaces, you are well treated and you're respected in your job, and the safety hazards are few. I have, of course, as being in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, traveled a lot and also worked with in very different environments. And I do think that is a quality, at least that I regard very highly in Denmark, that there's very little social difference between people. You're respected no matter what kind of job you have, if you're the cleaning lady or the cashier or if you're the ambassador. And I think this is something that certainly also contributes a lot to people's feeling of self-respect and happiness. Another issue is, and I think that's also relevant in the situation we have here in Greece now, that also in Denmark, of course, you might lose your job. And even civil servants can be laid off, and they are. We have been through a big round of sacking people in the public sector, even in my own ministry this year, which might also be of interest here in Greece. And of course, because we are in an economic crisis, it's a challenge. But usually the strength of the Danish system is that on the one hand, you can easily be fired, but you do get a decent unemployment benefit. And the chances of finding a new job is quite good, because companies are not scared of hiring people, because they know they can also get rid of them if they get into trouble. I think in many European countries that's a very stiff labor market, because it's difficult to fire people, and that prevents companies from hiring. I should stress that, of course, now when we are in a crisis situation, it's of course less easy to find a job than it used to be a few years back. But still, I think the unemployment levels in Denmark are low compared to most other European countries. So in conclusion, while the happiest people in the world, they might be a bit of a cliche, I think there are reasons why Denmark do feel like a good place to live. And I do hope you will find, as I said, the opportunity to come and see for yourselves. And I think we also have a brewery slogan that the beer is probably also the best in the world. So that's another reason for coming. I hope you will have a very, very interesting and fruitful conference. And I also wish you very lively discussions. And I saw that they already started earlier on. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.